Hi everyone. I'm a lot louder than I thought I was. Hi. Hi. For those of you who don't know me, allow me to introduce myself. My name is Kristen Santori. I am the Programming and Communications Manager for the church. Welcome. I would like to begin this evening by inviting you all to join me in an acknowledgement. With gratitude, we gather together today, and we acknowledge that we gather on the unceded land of the Montaukett, Manhasset, and Shinnecock nations. May the respect that we have and the gratitude we have for the ancestral spirit of this land and each other be what would lead us forward. I have the honor of introducing this fine young gentleman right here, who has been in the bookbinding business for over 40 years. I don't know about you guys, but I am one of those people that really love when somebody is super passionate about what they do and what they talk about. It has been an absolute pleasure to work with you, sir, and I'm excited for you guys to take this talk in because he knows what he's talking about and it's really cool. So without further ado, Mr. Paul Vogel.
Thank you for coming on this cold night. My name's Paul Vogel, and I've been binding books for close on 45 years. And I started off at Pratt in 1969 studying book design. Part of the course was to send us over to the Rare Book School at Columbia University, where we bound the book by hand in the traditional manner. After I graduated, I went overseas on a grand tour, which wound up taking 6 years. 2 years in Africa, going Cairo down to Cape Town, overland. A year in the Middle East, 3 years in Europe, and at the end of this jaunt, I was in London, mulling over returning to the States, to New York, and starting a career. And at this point, I discovered that all of the skills that I learned at Pratt that involved handwork were now being done by computers, so I had to go with a plan B. And I remembered binding that book at the Rare Book School and followed up on it in London. And I went out to several binderies, and I found the binders to be a very friendly and generous and supportive group. I liked everything about their world. I liked the bindery. I felt that it was exotically archaic. I liked the smell of the leather. I liked the fact that bookbinding had a long and respected tradition, and I especially liked the fact that I would be solely in charge of making something by hand that had a beginning, a middle, and an end. And I love the fact of the finality when you get to the end, that it either works or it doesn't work. And when it does, it's done, it's good, you move on to the next project. I came back to New York and I apprenticed at several binderies. Each one had their own strength and techniques. One of them dealt with cloth and different decorative papers. They made mostly desk accessories and notebooks. I was in another bindery where they restored books. And I was in another bindery where they mainly did full leather binding with lots of gold tooling. So I got to pick and choose from each of these and cobble together my own sense of style. I set up my own bindery eventually, and after 12 years, I had enough of a clientele base that I could move out to East Hampton in 1992 with my wife and my daughter Heather. And I've been living and working here ever since. Now, I want to take you into the distant past, show you some structures that dealt with the problem, and these are structures that all came before the book, obviously, and they dealt with the problem of how to record information on an object that's durable, that you can hold in your hand and transport easily. And one of the first solutions to this problem is this baboon bone from Swaziland in Africa. And it's 44,000 years old. Those, whoops, go back, sorry, just trying to push something else. And those marks that are scored on it make this a tally stick, which is something that tells the number of something. Theories range from the number of animals he had to lunar cycles. And this rather deceptively primitive and simple device had staying power. It lasted all the way and was in use all the way up until 1826 in Britain. In the medieval period in Britain, they made them out of hazelwood, and they were used for contracts for lending and borrowing. They would notch the wood with the monetary amount involved, write the borrower's name on one side, the lender's name on the other side, and then this stick, which is roughly about 8 inches long, would be split top to bottom. One half would go to the stick would go to the borrower, and that's called the foil. And the lender, his stick, was called the stock. Eventually, you could buy and trade these in the stock market. And that lasted, this method lasted all the way, as I said, till 1826. And in the Exchequer, Britain came up with a new system, so these were now defunct. But they did not go quietly that good night. They were ordered to be burned. They were in the basement of the Houses of Parliament. And there were sentries over them. And the fire that they created got out of control and burnt down both Houses of Parliament to the ground and almost took down the Palace of Westminster. And it was such a spectacular conflagration that William Turner made a painting of it. So they had the last laugh on that. Now we're going to go 5,200 years ago. We're in Mesopotamia. The Sumerians had developed a highly sophisticated language and writing system called cuneiform, or cuneiform. It's another pre-pronunciation. I think this is a word that you can't mispronounce because there's a dictionary out there somewhere that will back you up. And it was simply a lump of clay, roughly about the size of a potato, and you had soft clay, and you had a stylus with a triangular profile that could make these wedge-shaped marks. Cuneiform is Latin for wedge. They would be put in the sun and hardened. They also used large clay tablets for more grand statements, and it's on a couple of these large clay tablets that they found the first instance of literature. It was the Epic of Gilgamesh. It was about a demigod who tried to find immortality. Spoiler alert, he didn't. And centuries later, they were under siege, and their repository that held the clay tablets was set ablaze, and it effectively turned it into a kiln that even further hardened them. So there are still thousands of these cuneiforms around the world in different collections and museums. Now we have the scroll, and the earliest one found dates back to about 4,500 years ago, and it was written and belonged to this fellow called Merer, M-E-R-E-R, and he was the foreman working on the pyramids of Giza, and this is his daily log, transporting lime blocks from a quarry that was 9 miles away from the pyramids on a ferry with 40 men. And it turns out he was able to move 200 blocks a month, and each block was 2 to 3 tons. So it's quite an impressive feat. Now, originally they were made out of papyrus, and if you look in your little booklet, white booklet, and if you don't have one, there are some up here, or my daughter Hadley can bring one over to you. There's the piece of papyrus that you, and just by looking at it, you can see how it was made. They were papyrus or reeds that grow along the banks of the Nile. They were harvested and cut to roughly about 15-inch length, and then they were laid side by side on a hard, flat surface. You sprinkle lime over top of it, and lay another layer of papyrus at 90 degrees. They were pounded together, and they released this adhesive that laminated two of them together to form a sheet. You can take that out, trim them down, and adhere one to the next to make your roll. Some rolls were as long as 30 feet. Now we're moving up to the beginning of the Christian era, and these are wax tablets. They were in use a long time before, but the Romans popularized them. It's a thin wooden board with a raised wooden frame, and they're filled in the middle with wax. And they have a stylus at the point at one end and a burnisher at the other end. And they were used for casual notation. Students would use them for penmanship or sort of simple accounting. And you could erase or clean off this surface by heating the wax and using the burnisher to smooth it out. You're ready to go again. It's a bit like an ancient Etch-a-Sketch. And, but there was a minor but world-changing innovation on these that made all the difference. And you can see that they drilled a couple of holes on the long side and laced them together with a leather thong, which turned them into the beginnings of a book. You now had wooden pages that can turn. And it was only 100 or so years after this that we got to the codex. And the codex is folded sheets sewn along the common edge and in a protective cover. And these are the earliest known codexes. They were found in Egypt, buried in a large clay pot deep underneath the sand in northern Egypt. They were bound and written by the Egyptian Copts, C-O-P-T-S. They were an early Christian sect. They're still there. They make up about 10% of the population in Egypt. And we're lucky that these survived because they had what was considered heretical tracts, and the early Christian church wanted them to be destroyed. So that's why they were buried for so long. They were only discovered in the 1940s. And inside there were some Gnostic tracts. There were the letters of Thomas, which had quotes from Jesus, and some of them got really far-fetched. And there was also some Plato in there as well. Now, these were made with papyrus, but eventually people moved on to using parchment. And parchment is a leather, a type of leather, very different than the leather that we most commonly deal with, like for shoes and clothes. It was not tanned the way leather was, which is using tannin or tree bark. You were using aluminum salts, and so you came out with a different product. A parchment skin, which you also have a piece in your booklet, could be creamy in color, very light in color, and it was very smooth when it was polished, and it was an excellent writing material. It took inks much better than anything else. And also, I feel it is the most durable writing material in existence. In 1966 in Florence, there was a flood, and tens of thousands of books were submerged underwater, and they flew in conservatives from all over the world. And the books that fared the best were the ones that were made out of parchment. Though they were soggy, they could disbind them, which means take them apart and put them out flat, and put blotter paper between each sheet, and stack them up, and then put flat weight on top and let them dry. They would return to being flat again. They could be folded, sewn, and put back in their covers. Whereas many of the paper bindings became a solid block, paper adhered one to the next. And it was exceptionally difficult, time-consuming, and expensive to separate. They eventually took some and had to put them in a freezer so they could be stabilized until they could get around to it at some future date. Now, this is going to be a 1-minute video of me binding a book. And we start off with taking the full-size sheets, folding them, and then I gather a couple together to make a signature, which is a group of folded sheets. That's my board shear, and I'm cutting them. And here I am, at this point, sewing the signatures together. It's called a sewing frame. Now they go into a backing press, which is a big vise, and with a flat-headed hammer, bookbinding hammer, I coerce the edges over to give it shoulder. Those are the raised areas. Gold leaf is put onto the leather. The brass tool is heated. Press through the gold leaf. Remove the gold leaf and you're left with your design. This is the final detailing from the head caps. And that is a very abbreviated view of binding a book. Usually takes a lot longer. This is my bindery in East Hampton. And let's see if I can get the leaves are working. Here we go. Over here on the right, those are cloths. And they come from all over the world. But I mostly use German, American, and Japanese cloths. And over here, in between this section over here, those objects that look like pizza cutters are actually decorative rolls. There has a brass disc at the end, and off the edge of the brass is engraved different decorative designs. And they're heated up, and like the hand tool, they are pressed through the gold into the leather, transferring the design. Over here on the left are my leathers. I have two major groups of leathers: calfskin, which is smooth, and goatskin, which has more of a grain to it. They're made in Edinburgh for calfskin, Northamptonshire for goatskin, in France for some of the other goatskin. Down here is my board shear, and over there is a standing press. There's still some more equipment over there, but I use that that's what I use the most. Here I am at the Plaza Hotel. I had a space there for 10 years inside the Assaline bookstore. And Prosper was kind enough to let me set up in there, and I would bind the books that customers who bought his books and wanted a personalized cover on it would come to me. This is what I think most people think of when I tell them I bind books by hand. This is a very traditional kind of a Victorian style book. But I also do lots of other stuff. This facade was originally put together by me out of pieces of wood using the architectural drawings. And it's laid on the cover board and then covered with a calfskin that has been soaked in wheat paste and stretched so that I could model it and detail it to get everything precisely detailed. And here's another one. It's the same process. I just like it's a tan calfskin and I modeled with some leather dye. This one has kind of all the bells and whistles on it. It has two types of decorating techniques with leather. One is an inlay and the other one's an onlay. The onlay, as it sounds, lays on top of the leather, and that's the blue. And the inlay, the moon, is set into the cover. So I had to cut a circle out of the cover and an exact same size circle, cut a piece of orange leather, and then drop it in like that with a jigsaw puzzle piece. It also has custom cut brass dies and some more detailing with inlays at the bottom of the book. We do a lot of work for the entertainment business. We did Robin Williams scripts for 17 years, and he was such a nice guy. He did books for every one of his movies. These would be commissioned after the movie, and he'd have me make 250 of them, and he'd give them out to everybody involved in it. You're a key grit or the director or anyone. We'd sign them all. Here's a quirky little desk accessory or a gift item. It's a silver-plated lambskin, and it's a notebook, and that's silver-plated leather barbed wire to keep out prying eyes on the diary. My wife is an accomplished artist, and we work together on projects where I need something hand-painted that will be part of the binding. In this case, it was a case that was to hold books and catalogs on fly fishing. So she painted a number, she painted 20 different hand-tied flies, and they were in turn set into the cover of this case. And here she is, we restore books. This is called a clamshell case or a Solander case. And they're primarily used to protect books, but they are also used just as a catch-all holder that's quite handsome. You can have it on your desk, throw your pens and everything else in it, close the top, and your desk is all tidied up. They're very important for protecting, especially trade copy books, because many first editions, that the dust jacket is worth almost as much as the book itself. And that's why they need to be cased in something. You never want to touch the book itself. You want to make a protective cover for it. Here's another type of case. It's for opera glasses. We're always coming up with these quirky requests. And this is an interesting type of binding as well, because I was experimenting with this old style binding called a fireproof binding, where it was, you built the structure and then continually wrapped paper around it, build it up even thicker. And they call it fireproof because they say that if it was to be in a fire, it would take longer to burn through that wrapped paper than a single solid, thicker board. Another case to hold they were crystal awards, and this thing was quite kinetic. It had flaps that joined with magnets, and so I kind of liked it because it was fun to play with. I also make desk accessories, games and frames, as well as more desk accessories. Now this, we do a number of these. Those are fake book spines. I'm on a ladder, and you can actually see my foot over to the left, and they're on the floor of the bindery. And I have a number of clients who have, well, they're decorators who have clients who have apartments where they have a library, and in the library they'll have a television or a wet bar or something, and there's doors that go over it, and they want to have faux books on it, so the entire bindery or library is seamlessly covered with books. I always thought that it would be quite embarrassing if somebody's left in the room on their own for a long while. Nothing to do, and they try to pry one of these off, and it's in their hand. I'll hide it, get out of here. And this is quite a tour de force. It was a trunk. I had to work with a carpenter to make the basic structure, and then cover it, and then add on latches and brass bossing, leather straps. It took quite a while, but it worked out very well. And again, here's Abigail coming to the rescue, and she did the initials on each one. This is a project I did for a local fellow who has a landscaping company. And he had these, they're like thin iPads that he put his portfolio on. And he wanted to have them to look like books from the outside, so when you open them, it would trigger this video with sound, and you would now be looking at a video. There were 6 of them that went in a large slip. Okay, now, I'm showing this to, just as an example of how information has shrunk not only our world, but has shrunk the size of books or objects that contain information. This is the Oxford English Dictionary. You can read some of this stuff here. The Oxford English Dictionary weighs 137 pounds. And it has about over a half a million entries. And whereas the one to the right is the Kindle, which also has the Oxford English Dictionary. And then to the right of that is a CD, and it's been reduced to 2 CDs. Now, in about the early medieval period, books were not only bound in leather, which is a very common material, they would also use silver covers inlaid with jewels, as well as the book on the right is velvet with embroidery. And these were mostly owned by popes and princes. The velvet was an exceptionally expensive material at that point. It was highly sought after. And this is an example of a book as sculpture. It's just folded pages, and there are so many variations on this. I thought I'd just show the one slide. But people have cut into the pages to show the different depths within the book, and they become whole panoramas. And a lot of that's grain derising from a 17th century British botanist who used to cut and paste things onto his books, and that's where the term comes from. And that brings us to the end of the slide, and I thought I would talk a bit about some of the materials that I didn't cover here. One of them is paper. Paper was discovered by the Chinese about 1,000 years ago, and you're going to have to be very accepting of a lot of my dating time. So covering my territory. And it was made out of mulberry, and 700 years later, they were in the battle with Muslims and lost, and they captured a number of Chinese paper makers and learned the craft. And it finally made its way over to Spain through the Moors, and eventually up into Italy in about 1200, where they refined the process, making a very high quality, unusual paper. And in Europe, paper was made out of cotton rag, which literally was cotton rags. They would set up their shops on the outside of cities, and they would collect discarded clothing and ship sails and any cloths, and they would mulch it, pulp it, mix it with a liquid, and it would be poured over a wire frame that was suspended above and parallel to the ground so the liquid could run through. The fibers would settle and settle in a parallel pattern, and paper would dry, and you'd be able to peel it off and have a sheet of paper. In your booklet again, you can go back there. I have a piece of newspaper, a rectangle. And another quality about paper, most of the grain has a definite effect on the flexibility of the paper. It's critical that bookbinders have books with the grain running top to bottom. Otherwise, there'd be some resistance, and the pages wouldn't turn as easily. It'd be not only an unpleasant reading experience, but the tendency would be to push pages down to lead into the center margin, and you'd possibly break or at least damage the sewing. So on here, I don't know if you can feel it, but if you bend the paper slightly, and very sensitive about it, you'll feel that it bends more easily one way than the other. And so here, it's running top to bottom. Now, another thing that you'll see is if you were to go in an inch off to the side, rip off a tab about an inch wide, slowly tear down top to bottom, it comes off pretty straight. But if you turn this 90 degrees and try to rip across, you have a very different. So you're tearing across the grain. It's biting you. See where we are right now. Yeah, at this point, I wanted to have us sew our book, our little booklet. I made an oversized one, and I can walk you through it if you're interested, or you can do it at the privacy of your own home. I have a needle, thread. Oh, here's some. needle and thread. Here's the bookbinding hack. Pull out a length long enough that you can poke the needle through the short end. You might have difficulty with this, your bigger thread, but dip if you can, it's not a big deal. But if you poke it through, work down like this, over the eye of the needle. It keeps the thread attached to the needle, but it doesn't have a lump. So you can pull it through a hole without it getting caught. What's that?
A lot of people miss it.
Oh, it's too far away? Okay. Yeah, I was saying that for the bookbinding hack, you pull a length of thread through the eye of the needle, and you poke the needle through that short length and bring it down over the eye of the needle so they both come together, the long length and the short length. Hadley, my daughter will come over and show you. It's just a little bit tricky to get it through such a thin piece of thread. Yeah, it's a very thin thread, so it's a challenge. Yeah. It is. I got a thicker thread because I wanted to give you something a bit more dramatic than what I would normally use. No, I normally use linen thread, Irish linen thread. This one, you know, oh, the Irish one, it's the code on it is 18. And you know what, all that depends. I could use a thinner thread if I was sewing thinner paper, and it was acceptably thick, coarse paper, then I would use a thicker thread. Because you don't want too much thread building up in the spine of the book, because then it becomes thick back there and thin in the front. It's not a good thing. Oh, these bananas, I'm preparing something. I find that just pushing the needle through without doing that, very often, it's a tight fit, it pulls the thread off the needle. And with this, it won't pull the thread off the needle, or it won't jam going through them. I try to use it all the time, but I've had it where I was sewing or got pulled through the eye of the needle and that's it. And there's a name for it, there's not So anyway, we're at the point now where you take your needle, and they can be just arbitrary, but we're going to have one in the middle, one at the top, one at the bottom, 3 holes. We start off from the inside, going to the outside, pulling the thread through, and leave a good length sticking out. And then you go to your top hole from the outside, going in, and pull the thread through. And now you take your needle and go back through the middle hole, the same hole, pull it through. And to the other side of your booklet, punch in from the outside, through the hole, into the middle. So you should be at this point here. Just kind of give them a tug to make sure they're tight. There's different ways of doing it, but eventually we're going to tie up a knot. One way is to take your needle and go underneath this top loop. So the catch is there. You have this, and now I put this down to do it, but you pull them tight. You put your finger at that juncture where they overlap, and make your knot. Take your scissor and cut up all the extra thread, and you now have a figure 8-inch booklet. And the reason why I like to do this is because I get on my high horse about archivists and how future generations, when they're looking at information, they will really never feel that they've got the actual, true, original information, because everything's now electronic impulses on the internet, which can always be tampered with. Whereas this pamphlet, if you put your name and date on it, it will last hundreds of years longer than any information, technical information system or money today. All that I did was, you can do anything that works for you. I went underneath the upper loop. And this way, if you grab onto something, you pull it back. And then so you now have made codex. It took 44,000 years to get here, but they did it. Oh, and I also brought some examples of my binding here. This is a clientele case, and it's part of it. So you're welcome to come up with the answers. This is interesting. I was working on a book that had this green paper going out.
Hello? Can I help?
Yeah.
This is looking really good.
This is interesting. I was working on restoring a book, and they didn't want the cover. They wanted a new cover on it.
It's
And it was this green paper, which is pretty boring. So
have you done
I had it off the book, and some water got on it, and I saw that there was something printed underneath. So I wiped off that green paper. Underneath was a piece of parchment with calligraphy. And it's not that uncommon because during the Reformation in Britain and Germany, they were cutting up Catholic Bibles and hymnals and using that papyrus to repurpose it in binding. And that's where this came from.
Let's see what papers it is.
This is, yes, it's mobile microphone.
Oh, that looks good.
I think it's safer like come back over it. I'm guessing it's about 500 years old, as is this book, which you're welcome to come up and handle to show you how durable these structures can be. This is the Bible from 1584. And it's called the Preacher's Bible because the passage where they said, in most Bibles, that in the Garden of Eden, Adam shows himself an apron of fig leaves. They said here, he showed himself an apron. You can see that the pages are supple, and they turn very easily, very smooth.
So, this little guy? Yes, exactly. Can you make a bullet? Yes.
And these little wooden contraptions here are the tools and equipment that I would use at home, that they would be made out of cast iron and steel, except for this sewing press, which would be wood. And so it shows you the major steps that go into a binding.
I teach at the Center for Comfort.
Do we have any questions?
Well, are we done? You are. Thank you so much.
The which?
Yeah, let me, I'll come.
They do. They do.
Oh my goodness.
But since they're so
Let's take a look.
durable,
I'm gonna open this one and do a
it's just
parallel.
well to buy one that's 150 years old with cast iron and steel.
You didn't do it.
The new ones are
Hey,
beautiful.
I know
They're
you.
very expensive.
Good, how are you? Yeah. Okay, cute. This is, you know what, though? I think, let's take this out. This is, I'll show
Oh,
you.
these? Okay.
It's a lack of,
Okay.
Sorry, I'm just asking about the binding, not just simply the sewing
I'm gonna
phase,
get in
but
there and try to.
how you put the whole thing together.
Okay, well, at this stage, I've sewed the signatures. The next stage would be cut off these are called tapes. And it would go into a backing press, it's like a big vise. And I would have a hammer, and I would coerce or hammer the back of the book over and a mushroom shape, and would leave a lip. And that lip is as thick as the cover board that would go onto the book. Then I would cut my leather, I cut my cover boards, and then I would cut my leather. And
So these are,
stretch your leather over the book and around the cover boards.
you're gonna make a freehold.
Sky the
So I'm gonna-
corners,
I'm gonna guide
turn
this
them
for
in,
you.
and
Let's use this one.
you also have end papers on it. They can be decorative
Then you won't
or
want to
plain.
put the top.
And then the book gets cased into the cover, and the decorative papers get pasted down on the inside of the cover boards.
And what you're gonna
That's
do is.
pretty much an abbreviated view of how the book will be done.
Paul, we have a question right
Here
now.
it goes. So then in.
If you have a 100-year-old book that's made out of paper
Go
wrapped
back
in marker,
here.
and the page
And
itself
then
is
tie these. So the whole thing's a figure eight up in the middle.
there are missing corners, are you able to rebind the book of that quality?
Yeah.
Well, I could, but then they would have a book that's falling
Why
apart.
are we going?
What that book needs, where that needs to go to, is a paper conservator, and that's a whole other discipline. These are people in white lab coats. We're dealing with high-tech machinery, they do spectrography, and paper analysis. And they can do wonderful things, but it's exceptionally expensive. And Eric, did you have a follow-up question on that?
Oh, well, you're doing great. I mean, yeah.
I got
Watch your
the,
finger, because these are sharp.
binding these folds
And then
together,
take this
tying them together, and I got how you did the cover. But how do you adhere to this, to the back of the book?
Oh, to actually encase it in?
Yeah, what is that? Is that sewn as well, or is that glued, or how do you?
Well, there's two ways of doing it. In one, the tapes, or those bands that went across that the sewing went around, would get set into the cover boards, and then the leather would go over that in the hole, so that it would all be one piece. Another way is case binding, where the cover is made off the book, and the spine of the book that you sew and rounded will be, it'll have a paper backing on it and a tube, so that when you open the book, it releases from the back. It's called throwing up. That's when you open up a book, and the back arches. Yeah. So this allows you to set that into the book and open it without pulling the spine of the book in. So there's two ways: cased in or laced on.
Paul, we have one right here.
Can you recommend an online source for education, equipment, and materials?
Yeah, well, the Center for Book Arts on 28th Street, Hadley?
27th.
27th Street is a school for bookbinders. My daughter teaches there, and she also does private lessons. And they're a great source to learn the basics of bookbinding. They have it at all different levels. As for materials, the main source would probably be Talus. It's a store. It's in Brooklyn now, and they sell all the materials that you would need, as well as they do on occasion have equipment too. But there are other places, but that's the first place I direct you to. And you wanted something else?
Education, equipment, and materials.
Yeah, education, Center for Book Arts, equipment, materials, Talas, T-A-L-A-S.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, if I understand it right, there's two different types of bookbinding or ways to present a book, and I'm interested in the one where you can open the book and the pages are perfectly flat left and right. It's not like a novel or something where you have to hold it together, but it's usually articles that all perfectly flat.
Okay. Alrighty. The most difficult, challenging, and frustrating books to restore are art books. Because they're put together, and they work for a couple of years, and they're great. And now that thin layer of rubber glue that they have in the back, we have these stiff sheets on the back, is breaking apart. And try to put those back together is exceptionally difficult because you just can't put the rubber glue on it anymore. And there's nothing to grab onto. There's no area on the page itself.
That's more like a 20th century type of
It is. It is. But there is a way that you can make a book. It's called a long stick binding. And it goes back to the 15th century. And it doesn't use any glue. And it's a sewed structure. And it not only lies absolutely flat, but you can use different types of paper within there. Because each section is sewed in separately to the cover. It's independent of the signature or section next to it. And so that would be a good option to look into.
What would you call that?
Long Stitch, Longstitch. And they give classes for that over at the Center for Book Arts, I believe.
We covered that in bookbinding one.
Okay.
If we were doing a photographic book, and using photographic printing papers, in other words, inkjet papers, have you ever tried that? And are there problems with it? I found that when you fold it, it's cracked.
It cracks, yeah.
Yeah. Is there any solution?
Not that I've come up with. I've tried to be as careful as I could folding. But you can see it. You know, if you're looking for it, sometimes it's less, but it's there. Yeah. Because it's the skin on top. It's just breaking apart. You fold it in on itself.
Paul, what's the average time to find, I don't know, one of your standard books, like maybe a Robin Williams movie book, you know, from start to finish? And number two, where do you get most of your leather from? And if there's a challenge getting it?
Okay. Taking Robin Williams as an example, I'd be doing a lot of them. So that's when I'd be bringing Hadley and Abby on board to help projects that are more than I can handle. And I could get a book done, or a couple done in a day. Yeah. Because I would send them out to be gilded. That's the gold on the edge of the text block. They would come back, and I could round them back sort of a dozen, and get the decorative papers trimmed and on, and I could sort of fast forward a lot of these steps. So I wouldn't do a dozen a day. I'd probably do about 4 a day. Yeah. And did you have another part of that question? Oh, for leather sources, you can either buy it directly or at Talas, but there's main suppliers in calfskin, Hewitt's in Scotland, and there's Russell's and Harmattan in England, and the French also make leather all round. There's another company that makes leather. They don't, they don't make archival leather in the United States, at least on a scale where you could order a lot of it or be assured that you would back to them months or years later that they'd still be in business. There's just not enough demand for them to do it. Susie.
So I was wondering, over the course of 40 years, if your feelings about the art form have changed? Are there ways you think about your work differently?
No, not really. Because when I first started asking about bookbinding, one of the first people I met was this fellow Bernard Middleton, who's probably in his 50s at that point. And this is in England where they have an apprenticeship system. And he started off sweeping a shop when he was about 12 years old for about 4 years. And then I think it was 3 years getting coffee. It was many years later, it was in his late teens before they allowed him to touch anything. And this fellow was a wealth of knowledge. He was considered one of the best bookbinders, not only in Britain, but in the world. And he was very generous, and he came in and spent the day together. And he said, "Karen, I'm showing you a book. Do you have any suggestions?" And I thought, he's asking me, he knows I know nothing. But it made me realize that you're always learning something. So it could always be as fresh or as creative as you wanted it to be. You know, you could stick. It would be a lot easier just to have a narrow focus and not have to worry about reinventing the wheel every week. But the choice is yours. Yeah.
There's here, and then there, and then I'll come to you.
Hi. When you showed the slide of your studio or your workshop, and you had all the leather on one side, there seemed to be a plethora of red. Is there a preferred color that you found over the years that people like for bookbinding? You seem to have more red than any other color.
Yeah, that must be because when that picture was taken, I was working on a project that used a lot of red.
Oh, okay.
The curious thing is, certain colors come into, I had a request for a certain color from several people who don't even have any connection with each other. And that's kind of strange. Like somebody might want a mint green. I'll think, well, that's an unusual color. And then somebody else will call and they want a set of books done in mint green. And then you don't hear of it again for years. So don't buy too much mint green. But yeah, so I try to keep the colors that are the standards are the blacks, dark green, dark blue, a burgundy, a nice cherry, bright red. Those are always good go-to.
She's probably have here, and then we're gonna go up, and then we'll end with April.
As someone who has offered a 500-year-old book for us to touch, what are your 3 favorite books, either bound by someone else, bound by yourself, and the oldest one? And then why did those 3 rise to such a level of importance to you?
Well, I guess the most important book that I ever bound, I didn't actually bind it, I made a case for it, but I did get to have it for a couple of weeks while I was doing it. It was the Shakespeare First Folio. And you don't get to be in the same room with these things normally. And I got to have it for a while. And the same with the Capriccios. I had to sign papers that I was responsible for it, show insurance. And you get to look at these things at your leisure, which is a whole other thing than being, like, say, in the rare book section of the public library, where you're hungry and you're sweating, you come in outside, and you've got to look at it. It's not the most conducive environment to really settle and appreciate something. So I'm very lucky and appreciative when I do a book that I can look at it at my own leisure. And one of my favorite books it's called The Nuremberg Chronicle. And it was in Germany, in Nuremberg, and it was printed in roughly the 1470s. And it was a Christian view of the history of the world up to that point. And it starts with Genesis, and it was heavily illustrated. It was the most illustrated book of the 15th century. And Albert Dürer worked in the studio when he was a teenager. I thought he did some, there was a theory that he did some of the woodcuts that were in it, but I just read before I came up here that somebody squelched that. They unsquelched it. But it was the history of the world up to then. And I think of it as being a primer for this new middle class, so they could hold their own at a cocktail party. And they could say something like, I don't know, Pope Joan, what's the world coming to? Because I do have a copy with, they had all the popes, and they had Pope Joan who was in Avignon, and it was face was not scratched out. Because on most of them, they scratched out if they felt it was heresy. Yeah, so those are my three favorite.
Hi, it's great to see you, and we're so lucky here to have your studio.
Thanks, Mom.
I loved going through it, and I wish you were on the garden. Books deserve viewers too. You talked about the ephemera of internet visuals, the fact that books end up at the end of the line as we put everything online. And I'm very interested, do you really believe that books are durable and much more durable than what we're going through now? Huge trend.
You mean the physical codex?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Analog.
Yeah.
And it's worth taking books very seriously or making them, because chances are they're going to last longer than what goes on.
Yeah, and it's a record that is not easily tampered with, whereas
Yeah.
things online, Kevin in his mother's basement can tamper with it. I've read that on Kindle, the publisher can change the copy in the book without telling you. They don't have to tell you. They can, but it's legal to do that. So if you go back to show somebody that, wow, you should see what this fellow said on page 17, it might not be there, or it might be written differently. And it's all legal. Yeah.
Do you find that your clients and your requests for books are being made for different reasons by different people? It isn't only collectors who want to preserve, or people who, like Robin, want to give a gift. Do you find that people are coming to you as different clients at the internet?
Yes. When I first started, a lot of them were Park Avenue matrons who came from the tradition of having family albums, and they wanted albums for their kids. And then their kids would do it, but not as many, but their kids didn't do any. So it is changing, the clientele is changing. But the publishers that I've worked with, I've been with for HarperCollins for over 30 years. And this year, well, I bind the books for HarperCollins for the ones they give away at Christmas. So they give us the order in September. And these are all full leather with gold gilding, and every editor gets a list that they want to give to their best-selling favorite authors. And this year was the most I've ever gotten. So I thought that was heartening that the publishing company, that this year was a banner year for them. At least it was a banner year for me.
This is a really small question, but did you, and forgive me if you did, but did you mention vellum?
Vellum.
And what is the difference between vellum and
Parchment. Yeah, good question, because and now they're used interchangeably. As a matter of fact, to get away from the whole vellum parchment debate, they call it animal membrane. Because vellum is based veal, and they're calf, and it's a finer parchment, or a finer parchment type leather, and it can be very diaphanous. Could be.
Ours, for instance, is unrelevant, isn't it? Like the very.
Yeah, I am not sure. I'd imagine it's on vellum, because as I say, it has a nicer surface, a nicer, smoother, and these skins are also polished to give them a nice texture and smoothness on them. But I would say that they're probably calfskin or vellum. And here's another fun fact for parchment. Some of the large tomes took an entire herd of sheep to make. Yeah. So, so you end up with the book's this big, the sheet's that big. And the sheet, not the sheet, the sheet's only a little bit bigger. So you might only get one per sheet. Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming tonight. Paul, thank you for being here. I do want to encourage you to go up and take a look at the things that he's brought. I know he's very excited for you guys to see it, so please do so.
Thank you.